When's the best time to harvest potatoes? Look at these fantastic plants. In this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you exactly how and when to harvest potatoes and how to store them and some of the pests and diseases that you should be looking out for. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome to my family garden. And potatoes are an absolutely amazing crop to grow. They're something that is a really easy plant for beginners to get started with, and they're a fun family plant to be growing and harvesting. And it's time to start picking some of our potatoes. We grow potatoes in a variety of mediums. So we grow some in containers, like the ones behind me, and some we grow in the ground, like we saw at the start of the video. We have slightly different techniques and methods of growing potatoes than conventional gardeners, but the information you're going to get from this video is going to be applicable regardless of how you grow your potatoes and the method you grow your potatoes in. So generally you have two types of potatoes. You have your earlies and you have your main crop. Your earlies are known as your determinate potatoes and your main crop are known as your indeterminate potatoes. And earlies are sometimes split into two categories in themselves: first earlies and second earlies. Now with first early potatoes, you generally harvest those between 3 and 4 months. So between 3 and 4 months you can harvest first early potatoes. You'll get smaller potatoes. They're generally a lot smaller, but they produce some really nice roasting potatoes. So if you want to just pan fry some potatoes, first earlies are absolutely wonderful for that. So if you planted your first early potatoes in March, you'd be harvesting them towards June time, July time, that sort of time. Now second early potatoes, they take a little bit longer, not that much longer, but they take between 4 and 6 months. So if you planted your second early potatoes in March, again you'd be harvesting from July, August, that sort of time. They're an absolutely brilliant potato to grow, especially if you're growing in containers. Now generally when it comes to growing early potatoes, what I like to do is I like to grow potatoes in containers. Now I grow them in these 30-litre buckets, and now I've started growing them in these grow bags as well. They do okay in the grow bags, they do better in the buckets. If you've seen the method that I grow my potatoes in, I grow with a lot of homemade compost and home grown mulch, that sort of thing. And I use a lot of wood chip compost, so it's costing me hardly anything to plant in this sort of medium. So it's a really easy, simple way of growing. You can use really rough compost. You don't have to have perfect compost that you'd buy from the shop. So you don't have to be perfect when you're planting potatoes. That's why it's a really simple plant to plant. So at the start of March, plant your potatoes in a simple tub like this and let them grow. With earlies and second earlies, they tend to grow into smaller plants. They don't get much bigger than this plant here, really. Look at this. This is a second early plant, but the potato plant doesn't really get much bigger than this, and this is ready to harvest. A lot of earlies do flower, some don't. So look out for signs like when your plant's starting to die back. If your plant starts to die back like this, then this is a good time to start harvesting it. If you've got a variety of earlies that do flower, then the flowering indicates that the plant's reached maturity and it starts to produce seed pods. Now those seed pods can be used and harvested, and the seed can be saved from them, and you can grow your own potato from that. But it's a lot of work for a little return. It's much easier to plant a seed potato to grow another potato from. So once your potato plant's flowered, if it does flower, as it grows, it'll start to look something like this. And when it looks something like this, what it's telling you is this plant is starting to yellow off, it's starting to die back a little bit. It's no longer producing enough energy to maintain the plant, so it's not going to be putting any energy into those tubers. It's still got a little bit of green on it, so this plant is still good. Now if you weren't exactly ready to harvest your potatoes straight away, especially when they're grown in containers like this, one of the easiest things to do is just come back and cut the tops off at soil level and just leave it. Once you've topped the plants, just forget about it, and just harvest as and when you need them, because storage can be a problem for small-scale gardeners. So if you just top them and leave them as they are in containers, in a month's time when you're ready to pick them, harvest them. The other benefit that you get from just topping the potato plants and leaving them in the soil is that the potato skins start to toughen up and they store for much longer that way. But remember, early potatoes don't store as well, so it's good to leave them in the soil for as long as possible. Until you're ready to eat them, don't harvest them, is generally my advice. So what we tend to do is with our early potatoes is we come and pick as and when we need them. So if we were going to cook some roast potatoes today, we'd come and tip one of these buckets out and just harvest what we've got. Now the good thing about first early potatoes is because they're ready sort of June, July, August time, you can follow them on with another plant. A lot of gardeners, well, a lot of conventional growing advice is not to follow on potatoes with potatoes. Now, one of the things that we tend to do is, because it's homemade compost and the mulch that we're using is homemade and it's quite nutritious, it's not got any sort of outside influences in it, so to speak, we do follow on our potatoes with potatoes. So as soon as I've harvested this potato here, you can see this baby plant. So this was harvested maybe a month ago, and you can see this baby plant coming up now, and there's, you know, more shoots are coming up, so it's quite a young plant. Now I've planted a potato straight after a potato, and that's going to give me a harvest in around Christmas time. Now if you didn't want to follow up a potato with a potato, what you could do is, because it's nice nutritious soil, is follow it on with a courgette. In a bucket like this, in a tub like this, it'll be absolutely fine to use a courgette, and it'll establish itself and you get a later harvest. So that's one of the advantages of growing determinate potatoes. So here's a potato plant that's slightly bigger, and this was harvested earlier and planted earlier, and what we're going to do is we're going to stagger our winter harvest. So this plant we'll probably be able to harvest in around November time. With a little protection from the frosts, you can keep these plants going for a long time during winter, easy into November. Now when I'm growing these second crop of early potatoes, what I'm tending to do is I'm shoving these buckets into the greenhouse, or just covering them up with a bit of plastic or a bit of fleece or whatever I can get my hands on. I'm covering them up just to protect them from the frost. And I don't mind if the plant dies back. Now if the plant dies back in October, November, and then I'll pick the bucket in December, or I'll pick the bucket in January, I'll just leave them as they are. As long as you protect them from excess water, from excess rain, they're not going to rot. They'll be absolutely fine in there. Just keep them dry and they'll store for a long time in the soil as they are. Otherwise, you're going to have to, once you pull them all, you're going to have to worry about storing them. And that's what we're going to do with these potatoes, these next potatoes. This is a main crop potato that's been grown in a bucket, and you can see the size of the plant. It's a lot bigger. And the difference between determinate and indeterminate potatoes, determinate potatoes grow at a single level. So your first earlies, you can plant, you know, they grow at a single level and they're absolutely fine. But with these main crops, they grow along the stem just like tomatoes, but under the ground. So this is why you'll tend to earth up, you know, main crop potatoes more than you would early potatoes. So in this bed here, we had a mix of second early and some main crop varieties. But what we had strike them was blight, and the blight is one of the most common diseases that affects potatoes. So as soon as I saw the signs of blight, I cut all the foliage back down to the ground level. So this is what a blighty leaf can look like. It generally looks like this dark patches across the edge. Now, what I did with the rest of these potatoes was I chopped them back down to the ground so the blight doesn't spread to the rest of my potatoes. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to harvest all these potatoes, aren't we, sweetheart? You think? Come on. If you don't know about the way I grow my potatoes, is I grow my potatoes in wood chips, and it's an absolutely fantastic medium to be growing in. So we're going to just pull, we're going to go scrape through, we're going to crawl through this bed, and we're going to pull all these potatoes out. So we're starting to get to the edge of the potato plants, and you can see some of the potatoes here. So these, when you top them and leave them for at least a week, a couple of weeks, maybe even a month is absolutely fine. Now what I'm doing is I'm just scrolling across the edge of the potato, you know, across the edge of the bed, and just to uncover what I can find. Here's the first actual plant. So let's pull this guy up. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Here we go. And this is the advantage of growing in wood chips, is they grow so nice and clean. Yeah, you've got really lovely clean potatoes. Now don't leave any of this potato matter in the ground, because this is, once you've got blight, This is the thing that spreads more, you know, spreads the blight onto further on, is living potato matter. Blight doesn't survive on dead material yet, so it'll survive on underground tubers, but it won't survive on plants, you know, on composted material that's rotted down and finished. It's a really easy way of harvesting, you know, and when you're doing this, you're not damaging your potatoes either. So admittedly, it's a little bit early to harvest those potatoes, but the reason that we're harvesting it is because they've got that blight disease. It's a mix of earlies and main crop, so it doesn't matter with the main crop that it's a little bit early. We'll take them as smaller potatoes. These plants right behind me, this absolute jungle, these potato plants are doing amazing, and these flowers are the ones that you need to be looking out for. So as your potato plant matures, it'll produce these flowers, and you'll normally see them, if they're main crop potatoes, you'll see them around anywhere between July, August, that sort of time. So about 3 months after you've planted them, you'll see these potato flowers appearing. Those flowers will then go on to produce a little fruit that looks similar to a tomato. Now those fruits are actually poisonous, so you want to be careful of those. You can remove them. There is a little bit of mythology about if you remove the true potato seed, the plant actually puts more energy into the tuber. There's a little bit of mythology about that. There's a little bit of truth mixed into it. So if you remove them, fine. If you don't, fine. Don't worry about it. I leave them on. I don't worry about it. But these ones, I'm not going to harvest for at least another couple of months, because we're going to harvest those ones today and we're going to have a massive glut of potatoes. I want to stagger these harvests, so I don't want to just harvest loads now and have loads that I don't know what to do with, because I want to put some cover crop down on that bed. I'm harvesting as much as I can from there right now. When it comes to October, November time, that's when I'll harvest these, and we'll have another nice healthy crop of potatoes, and we'll be able to eat potatoes for the best part of 6 months from our own garden, which is pretty good from a backyard garden. When you store potatoes, like I've already mentioned, the best place to store potatoes is underground. Now if you can't do that, you want to find somewhere cool, somewhere dark, so around 5 degrees Celsius is ideal. Now if you can't do that, then what they used to do in the old days was they'd have an underground chamber. So if you could make one, if you had some paving slabs, dig a hole, bury some paving slabs, make a little square like a little tomb and bury your potatoes in there, and then you can use them from there. It's a way of producing cold storage without using any electricity or fridge technology. Your final option is a garage, a bed, a pantry cupboard that's going to stay as cool as possible, that's not going to be exposed to direct sunlight. That's the place to store them. If your potatoes are exposed to sunlight, they will turn green, and it is a little bit poisonous to eat potatoes like that. Just be a bit wary about it. I'm not going to go into how poisonous it is. So there's a little bit about when to harvest your potatoes, harvesting potatoes from your backyard garden, and I hope you enjoy. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.